Camilla Tate woke up long before dawn. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the bedroom was still dark, with only the faint orange light of the street lamps filtering through the gaps between the thick curtains. Her internal clock had long since gotten used to this routine. The morning show on TV was waiting for its presenter. Camilla fumbled to turn off the insistent alarm on her phone and lay there for a few seconds, gathering her strength. Her husband, Ethan Reed, was snoring nearby, cuddled up under the covers. He didn't have to get up that early. The cybersecurity specialist's workday started much later. Camilla gently ran her hand through Ethan's dark curls. He mumbled something in his sleep and rolled over. She smiled. Ethan looked so serene when he slept. Camilla sat up, put on a soft robe, and tiptoed out of the bedroom, trying not to make any noise. In the kitchen, she automatically puts water on to heat up for coffee. The house was quiet early in the morning, broken only by the rustle of her footsteps and the purr of the coffee maker. While the strong black coffee was brewing, Camilla turned on the dim light and looked at her reflection in the small mirror hanging on the wall. Her face still bore traces of sleep, slightly swollen eyelids, slight creases on her cheek from the pillow. She was 31, but she always felt older in these pre-dawn hours. "Never mind, coffee and a shower will fix me up," she said quietly to herself in Russian, though she was thinking in English out of habit. Over the years of working in the media industry, she had learned that no matter how you felt in the morning, there had to be energy and a smile on camera. Half an hour later, Camilla looked flawless. Her wavy brown hair was styled in an elegant updo, light makeup hid her fatigue, and she was wearing a light blue blouse and a dark pencil skirt. She caught the eye of Ethan, who had just woken up and appeared on the kitchen threshold in pajama pants and a wrinkled t-shirt. "Are you leaving already?" he asked hoarsely, still rubbing his eyes. "Yes, honey, I have to go," Camilla responded softly, raising a mug of coffee to her lips. "The broadcast starts at 7, and I still need to get ready for the studio." Ethan nodded and came closer. Despite his sleepy state, he hugged his wife around the waist and kissed her on the cheek. He smelled like a warm blanket and his usual night cream. "Have a nice broadcast, Cam," he muttered, yawning. "I'll try to turn on the TV by 7 and watch." "Thank you, dear," she smiled, putting the mug in the sink. "You can go back to sleep, it's still early." Ethan nodded, but before letting go of her embrace, he looked her in the eyes carefully. "How are you? Did you get enough sleep? You went to bed late again yesterday." There was concern in his voice. Camille had stayed up late the night before, preparing a script for a morning interview with a local chef. Or at least that was what she had told her husband. "I'm a little tired, but that's okay," she replied, looking down. "You know, from time to time you have to sit over the materials." He nodded understandingly and ran his hand over her shoulder. "Take care of yourself, okay? Don't overwork yourself." Of course, Camilla nodded. She suddenly wanted to say something else, maybe to reassure him that she was okay. But there was no time. She kissed her husband on the lips, grabbed her bag with her laptop and car keys. A minute later, the front door slammed, and Camilla stepped out onto the dark pre-dawn street. The town was nearly deserted at this early hour. The air was warm and humid, a typical June morning in Louisiana. Cicadas were buzzing on the deserted street, and a garbage truck was growling somewhere on the next street. Camille shivered at the sudden gust of wind, even though the morning was muggy. She was used to driving to work late at night, when the city was still asleep. Her car was parked under a street lamp, a white sedan, not new but reliable. Climbing in, Camilla threw her bag on the passenger seat. In just 15 minutes, she had to be at the studio. Starting the engine, she turned on the radio. Out of habit, soft jazz was playing. In New Orleans mornings, even the radio respected the measured rhythm of the waking city. Familiar neighborhoods floated past. The walk from their home in the Garden District to the television center was short. At such an early hour, the streets were free of traffic jams. On the way, Camilla thought about the upcoming broadcast. She had several blocks planned for that day: news, light chat with the co-host about local events, and an interview with a guest, the same chef who was supposed to come with a tasting of his signature dish. The car smoothly turned into the TV company's parking lot. The large, low studio building was already lit up with windows. Work had been going on there since early morning. Camilla parked in her usual spot, got out of the car, and walked quickly to the service entrance. The security guard on duty, recognizing her, nodded politely. "Good morning, Miss Tate." "Good day, George," she said, placing her pass on the turnstile. "How's the night, calm?" "Calm down, madam, as usual," the guard smiled. He always called her madam in the French manner, reminding her of the city's Creole roots. Walking down the corridor, illuminated by bright fluorescent lights, Camilla entered the dressing room. People were already bustling about makeup artist Ashley was laying out brushes, and the assistant director was leafing through the script of the episode. "Oh, Camilla, hi," Ashley exclaimed, catching sight of her in the mirror. "You look great, on time as always." Camilla smiled at her reflection as she sat down in the chair in front of the mirror. "Good morning, I try not to let you down. We have Chef Lebo as our guest today. Is everything ready?" The assistant director, without looking up from his papers, said, "Yes, he will come at 7:30. He will bring some of his dishes. We have already prepared a table for tasting in the studio." "Great," she nodded, closing her eyes as Ashley applied the final layer of powder to her face. "What's the latest news?" "There was a heavy rainfall in the Lake Pontchartrain area last night. A couple of streets were flooded, but the water is already receding," the assistant responded. "We also have a report this morning about the opening of a new police department." Camilla flipped through the script plan in her mind. Nothing out of the ordinary, a regular episode, which meant she could work in her usual rhythm. The makeup artist finished her work, and Camilla headed to the control room for the microphone. Her co-host, Mark, had already appeared, a tall, dark-haired man of about 40 with an invariable wide smile. "Cammy, good morning," he greeted her cheerfully, straightening his tie. "Hey, Mark," she automatically checked to make sure her jacket sat well over her blouse. "Ready?" "Always ready," he winked. "How did you like our match yesterday? Did you see it?" He was referring to the local baseball game they had argued about the day before. But Camilla had been busy preparing for an interview and doing household chores the day before, so she hadn't watched the game. "To my shame, I missed it," she sighed. "I promise to catch up next time." Mark shook his head in mock disappointment. "This is not right. Miss Sports Correspondent would not be proud of you." She just grinned in response. At that moment, the director gave the command to take their seats. The broadcast was about to begin. A minute later, Camille and Mark were sitting at a familiar table in a brightly lit studio. In front of them were cameras and a prompter, and behind them was a colorful intro to the show, "New Morning, New Orleans." Camille smiled at the camera, taking a short breath. The familiar excitement of going on air sent a slight tremor through her stomach. "Good morning, New Orleans," she began cheerfully, looking straight into the camera. "This is Camilla Tate." "And Mark Duval," the co-host chimed in, also smiling at the audience. "It's Wednesday, and we're excited to start this morning with you." Another day of her life had begun according to schedule, measuredly, habitually. But at the same time, somewhere deep inside Camilla felt a vague anxiety that had not been there before. While she cheerfully talked about the weather forecast and the traffic situation, this feeling was barely perceptible inside her. She attributed it to lack of sleep or stress. It could not have occurred to her how much her life would change in the coming months and what this new day would bring her. The show ended and the studio was quieting down after a busy morning. Camilla took off her microphone and headed to her corner of the general newsroom to finish writing notes for tomorrow's show. She had barely opened her laptop when the morning show's producer, David McAllister, a short, energetic man in his 50s with permanently tousled gray hair, approached her desk. "Camilla, our director still needs you," he said, hunched over her desk. "Right now, in the conference room." "Did something happen?" Camilla looked up in surprise. No, everything is fine. We have a visit from Logan Pierce himself. He wants to meet the hosts in person. So please," David waved his hand invitingly. Camilla's heartbeat quickened slightly. Of course, she had heard about Logan Pierce, the owner of a large media holding that owned their TV channel. There had been rumors of reshuffles and future investments for the last couple of years, and now, apparently, the boss himself was in place. For ordinary employees, such an event is always exciting. She quickly tidied herself up, fixed a strand of hair, smoothed her skirt, and followed the producer. Several of the executives were already crowded in the long hallway leading to the conference room. At the door, Camilla spotted the chief news editor, the head of advertising, and a couple of well-known daytime anchors. Everyone was whispering, waiting tensely. David said to her quietly, "Mr. Pierce will now finish his conversation with our CEO, and there will be a short introduction of the team." Camilla nodded. She felt a slight knot of nerves in her stomach, like she was about to go on air. She tried to act casual, but she could feel her palms getting sweaty. After all, it wasn't every day you met the owner of a company. A few minutes later, the conference room doors swung open and a small group of people walked out. Among them stood out a tall, stately man in an expensive dark blue suit. About 45 to 47 years old, Camilla guessed. A firm handshake, a confident gait. Dark hair with a slight gray at the temples, a tanned, well-groomed face, a polite smile on his thin lips. Logan Pierce in person. The channel's CEO, Mr. Burns, beamed at the sight of those waiting and gestured for everyone to come forward. "Good morning, colleagues," Burns said cheerfully. "Today we have the great honor of hosting Mr. Logan Pierce, owner of Pierce Media Group. He visited our New Orleans team in person for the first time." Logan stepped forward and raised his hand, stopping the flow of greetings. His voice was low and casual. "Thank you, Robert. It's nice to finally meet you all in person. I flew in for a short while to see how things were going, and of course, I wanted to see the talented people who make our channel #1 in the city." Several people exchanged quiet glances, flattered by the praise. Camilla stood a little behind everyone, watching Pierce. He looked even more impressive than in the magazine photos she had seen. He had the strength of a man accustomed to leadership. The CEO began introducing the employees one by one. Each one stepped forward, shook Logan's hand, and exchanged a few words. Finally, it was Camilla's turn. "And this is our morning star," Burns said enthusiastically. "Camille Tate, host of the morning show New Morning, New Orleans." Camilla blushed slightly from her superior's compliment, but stepped forward, extending her hand. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Pierce." "Likewise, Miss Tate." Logan Pierce looked her straight in the eye, shaking her hand firmly. "Finally, I get to meet the star of our morning show in person." He smiled slightly. Camilla felt herself becoming embarrassed under the intense attention. She managed to maintain a professional smile. "You're exaggerating," she replied modestly. "We're just trying to please the audience every morning." "And you're doing a great job," Logan said. His handshake was warm and lingering, releasing her hand a moment later than was proper etiquette. "I caught your episode today. It was a very lively and interesting show." "Thank you." Camilla looked down for a second. "We try to keep the standard high." She felt her heart beating fast, either from the excitement of meeting an important person or from the attentive look he gave her. The presentation continued. Logan spoke briefly with the hosts of the other programs, made some general statements about the development of the channel, and thanked everyone for their work. After a while, Mr. Burns announced that the meeting was over and everyone could return to their work. As people began to leave, Logan approached Camilla again. This time, without any unnecessary witnesses, producer David lingered nearby, but moved away as soon as he noticed that the boss wanted to talk to the presenter personally. "Miss Tate," Logan began softly, "I want to say again, you did a great job on the air today. How long have you been working in New Orleans?" "Thank you. Yes, I've been on this channel for 5 years now," she replied. "First I was a reporter, then I was promoted to morning show host." "I see, it's not in vain," Logan nodded approvingly. "You have a talent for holding an audience." He spoke sincerely, and Camilla felt a surge of pride. "I'm glad you stayed with our company. I hope Pierce Media values such employees. Of course, the company does a lot for us, she answered diplomatically. Logan bowed his head slightly, lowering his voice as if he was confidentially confiding a secret. If you have any suggestions or ideas for improving the program, I'm always happy to listen. Mr. Burns has my direct number. Feel free to take it. Camilla didn't even immediately know what to say to this proposal. That's very kind of you. No courtesy at all. Pierce smiled wider. I appreciate initiative, and from a professional like you, even more so. At these words, Burns approached them, probably noticing that the conversation had dragged on. The CEO politely intervened, apologizing. Sorry to interrupt. Logan, I think it's time we moved on schedule. Oh, yes, of course. Logan stepped back, but finally turned to Camilla again. Nice to meet you again, Miss Tate. I hope to see you again before I leave. And me, she answered, feeling warmth on her cheeks. He left with the CEO and his entourage. Camilla watched them go, aware that she was still clutching the notebook in her hand, almost crumpling its corners. She exhaled, trying to figure out what had excited her so much about this meeting. Wow, isn't it? Producer David winked at her as he appeared next to her. It's not every day that you get a guest like this. Oh yeah, Camilla smiled, a little confused. Impressive. Look, he even gave you a special compliment, David chuckled quietly. He squeezes your hand and keeps an eye on you. Oh, come on, she waved him off, feeling her cheeks burn even more. He's just being polite. Yeah, right, David raised his eyebrows with a sly smile. Okay, I won't gossip. Have a nice day, star of the air. He disappeared into the corridor, and Camilla stood there for a few more seconds, clutching the notebook to her chest. Her chest was tickling strangely from adrenaline. She shook her head, as if to drive away unnecessary thoughts, and returned to her desk to finish writing her notes. In the evening, already at home, Camilla was setting the table for dinner. A simple dish pasta with vegetables and chicken steamed and filled the entire kitchen with aroma. Outside the window, night insects began to chirp, and the table lamp filled the table with a soft yellow light. Ethan returned from work around 7 and now watched with gusto as his wife served the pasta on plates. It smells amazing, he said, rubbing his hands. I love your dinners after a long day. That's nice to hear, Camilla smiled and put the plates on the table. Have a seat. They sat down opposite each other. Ethan immediately started eating, apparently really hungry. He was wearing a shirt with rolled-up sleeves and still in business trousers. Apparently, he hadn't had time to change. How was your day? She asked, carefully twirling the pasta around her fork. Nothing, he answered with his mouth full, then quickly chewed and continued. We have a new project related to cybersecurity of banks. I've been running tests all day today. A bit monotonous, but important. How are you? Camilla put her fork down, wondering where to start. Today was definitely not a routine day. I've got something interesting, she drawled, meeting her husband's gaze. First of all, the broadcast went well, the guests were great. But the main thing is that Logan Pierce came to visit us. Ethan raised his eyebrows. The owner of your media holding. Yep, I flew in personally, met the team. The husband whistled and even pushed the plate away, leaning forward with interest. Come on, come on. And how do you like him? Respectable, very charismatic, Camilla admitted, thoughtfully twirling her fork in her fingers. You know, the kind of person who immediately attracts attention. Tall, self-confident, but at the same time polite. Ethan smiled slightly, noticing the sparkle in his wife's eyes as she told this. Looks like I made an impression, he teased softly. It's just nice when your boss appreciates your work, Camilla quickly explained, feeling herself blushing again, this time in front of her own husband. He praised our show, even said he watched today's episode. That's great. Maybe they'll give me a bonus, Ethan chuckled, returning to dinner. I don't know about the award, but he made it clear that he was open to suggestions and ideas. He even passed on his contact information through the director. Wow, Ethan looked up in surprise. direct contact with the owner. This is a big day. Yeah, Camilla suddenly fell silent, staring at her plate. She remembered Logan's firm handshake, his gaze. Strangely, she didn't want to share these impressions with her husband too animatedly. She was afraid that she would give away too much, although what was too much, really? Cam? Ethan called after her, noticing the pause. You're lost in thought. Sorry, I was lost in thought. She looked up and smiled tensely. It really was an unusual day. I need to digest it. The husband placed his hand on her palm, squeezing it gently. I'm happy for you. You're smart and talented. I wouldn't be surprised if you get offered something cooler over time. Thank you, she answered quietly and quickly removed her hand, starting to collect the empty plates. Would you like some tea? Okay, Ethan nodded. I'll just quickly check my email, okay? I have a report coming in. Of course, she replied. While her husband went to the laptop in the living room, Camilla washed the dishes and put the kettle on. She tried to think about the little things in life, but today's handshake and Logan Pierce's voice kept popping up in her head. Why was she so fixated on this? Well, she met a big boss, talked to him, it happens. Probably just nerves after a stressful day. Camilla took a deep breath and tried to push these thoughts away. After all, she had a loving husband waiting for her at home, a quiet evening. Everything was fine. With these thoughts, she poured boiling water over 2 mugs of tea and headed to the living room, trying to smile and distract herself with conversations about something ordinary. 2 days after Logan Pierce's visit to the broadcast center, Camilla received a message from her boss, Mr. Burns. It said that Mr. Pierce would like to invite her and several other employees to a casual dinner to discuss the network's creative plans. The dinner was scheduled for the following Friday at one of the finest restaurants in the French Quarter. When Camilla read this letter, everything inside her turned upside down. On the one hand, it was a great opportunity to communicate more closely with the owner of the holding to prove herself. On the other hand, something told her that Logan Pierce had not invited everyone. She, the editor-in-chief and anchor of the evening news, was on the list of invitees, a compact company of 4 people, including Pierce himself and Burns. Camilla spent Thursday and Friday before dinner nervously sorting through her wardrobe. It's just a work dinner, she reassured herself. But as she picked out her dress, she found herself wanting to look especially good. She chose an elegant, figure-flattering, but not revealing, dark green dress and black low-heeled shoes. On Friday night, before leaving the house, Camilla hesitated to tell her husband who she was meeting with. She had mentioned at dinner on Wednesday that there was a company dinner, but she hadn't emphasized that Logan Pierce himself would be there. Ethan knew there was a big boss in town, but he didn't seem alarmed. Before leaving, Camilla looked into the living room. Ethan was sitting with a tablet, looking at the news. I'm leaving, she said, adjusting her earring. I don't know how long it will all last. Don't expect me early. Ethan looked up and smiled. Okay, have fun there. Just don't stay too late. You'll have to get up at the crack of dawn again tomorrow. I'll try, she smiled back. Glancing at her husband, who was lying down on the sofa, Camilla felt a slight pang of conscience. She had nothing to be ashamed of, she was really going on business, but for some reason she felt awkward. The road to the restaurant took about 20 minutes. It was a stylish establishment with a historical interior and a high rating. Camilla often passed it during her walks around the center, but she rarely had a chance to dine there because of the prices. Mr. Burns was already waiting for her at the entrance, waving his hand in a friendly manner. Camilla, good evening. I'm glad you could come, he said. Good evening. I'm glad to have the invitation, she replied, trying to look confident. They walked inside together, and the maitre d' showed them to a reserved table in a private room. The evening news anchor, Greg Harris, and Logan Pierce himself were already seated there. The atmosphere was casual, soft jazz music in the background, soft candlelight. On the table was a decanter of water and aperitifs already ordered. Logan stood up immediately when they appeared. Miss Tate, glad you could join us, he said, greeting her. You look wonderful. Thank you. Camilla felt her cheeks turn slightly pink at the compliment. "Good evening." They sat down. Logan kindly pulled out a chair for Camilla next to him. Burns sat opposite, next to Harris. Soon the waiters took the dinner order. At first, they talked about work. Logan asked for opinions on the local media market, inquired about program ratings. Greg Harris talked about his experience working on the evening news, Burns about plans to expand regional broadcasting. Camilla made a few comments about the nature of the morning audience. She tried to remain professional and not show any embarrassment, although she was acutely aware of Logan's closeness. His sleeve occasionally brushed her elbow when he turned to address her a question. After the main course, Burns excused himself, citing a late call, and left the room with the phone. Greg, finding himself under Logan's close attention, soon found an excuse to take his leave. Too, he said he had an early morning broadcast and was very grateful for the invitation, but had to leave a little earlier. Pierce did not object and bid him farewell in a friendly manner. So, an hour and a half into the dinner, Camilla suddenly found herself alone with Logan at a cozy table, separated from the rest of the room by a carved partition. The waiter had quietly changed the plates and brought dessert, a light mousse with fruit and a glass of dessert wine. "I hope you don't mind our delay," Logan said quietly as they clinked glasses. "You're a lot more interesting to talk to than formal speeches." "It's nice for me too," Camilla admitted, a little quieter than usual. "It's not often that you get the chance to talk without being rushed." She took a small sip of sweet wine. Her head was spinning slightly. She had drunk a glass of red wine with the meat at dinner, and now the alcohol pleasantly relaxed her after the tension of the first hours. Logan put his glass down and turned to face her, his dark eyes watching hers intently, reflecting the flickering candlelight. "You know," he began in a softer tone than he had with his colleagues, "I'm glad I finally got to know you better, Camilla. Can't you just call me Camilla?" Of course, she put down her glass too, feeling her pulse quicken. "And should we call you Logan?" "That would be great," he smiled. "After all, we're not in the office anymore." She smiled back. There was a moment of silence. Camilla looked at her dessert, not daring to look up. She knew the atmosphere was far beyond a typical work dinner. Her heart was pounding in her chest, warning and urging her on at the same time. "You're married, right?" Logan asked suddenly, quietly. Camilla flinched in surprise and nodded. "Yes, for 3 years already. Is your husband here in New Orleans too?" "What does he do?" "Ethan. I mean my husband. He works in it. He's a cybersecurity specialist," she replied, suddenly feeling like a schoolgirl being questioned at the blackboard. "He's a great, smart person." "I see," Logan squinted slightly, as if assessing something invisible. "He's probably very proud of your career." "I think so." Camilla looked at her hands. "He's always supported me." "That's great," Pierce said warmly, but then paused to add, "although I must admit, when I saw you in the studio, I immediately thought that such a bright woman must have an equally worthy companion." Camilla didn't immediately find what to say in response to such a compliment. She only smiled shyly, lowering her eyes. Logan changed the subject so as not to embarrass her even more. He told a funny story from his experience, how a host at a TV station in Texas slept through the broadcast and how the team got by without him. Camilla laughed. The tension eased a little. They talked for another 20 minutes, no longer in a hurry. It turned out that they had common interests. For example, a love of jazz music. Logan mentioned that he adored local jazz bars. Camilla confirmed that she sometimes went with her husband to listen to live music. An image involuntarily appeared in her head. She, Logan, and a jazz club. She tried to push the image away. Finally, Logan glanced at his watch. "It's quite late. I don't want to keep you, because tomorrow we're on air again." "Yes," she sighed softly, also noticing that time had flown by. Logan motioned for the waiter to come over and paid without giving Camilla a second thought about the bill. He was always gallant. He helped her up, offered her his hand. She accepted the support as she rose from the table, and then felt his hand linger in hers a little longer than was required for a simple gesture of assistance. They walked out into the evening street together. The night in New Orleans was warm and humid. Music was playing in the distance. Tourists were walking along the sidewalks. Camille took a deep breath. Her head was still a little dizzy, but she felt surprisingly light. "Let me walk you to the car," Logan offered, remaining standing close. "I think I took a taxi," she admitted. "I didn't want to drive after a glass of wine." "A commendable foresight," he smiled. "Then I can give you a lift. I have a driver. He's waiting right now." Camilla hesitated. Going with the boss, it would seem like nothing special. But an inner voice whispered anxiously that the line between business and personal was already blurred. However, she did not dare refuse. "If it's really convenient." "Absolutely," Logan nodded to his bodyguard, who stood a little further away. He immediately opened the door of the black car. A minute later, they were already sitting on the soft leather seats of the spacious cabin. The driver quietly raised the tinted partition, leaving them alone in the back seat. The car moved off. "Where should I take you?" Logan asked quietly, turning to face her. His presence was even more noticeable in the confined space of the car. Camilla named an intersection near her home. She decided not to give the exact address, not knowing why. "It's a nice neighborhood," Logan said. "I used to live nearby on Lianshine Street many years ago." "Really?" she asked, trying to keep her tone light. "It's a small world." In fact, she had a hard time thinking about the conversation. Her mind was filled with the realization that she was sitting next to Logan Pierce in the dim light of the car, and they were alone. Her heart began to pound louder again. "Camilla," Logan said quietly, "can I just say one thing?" She turned her face toward him, his features softening in the dim light of the dashboard. "Yes." He hesitated for a second, as if choosing his words. "I understand perfectly well that you and I are colleagues, and that you are a married woman." He began quietly, "But I must be honest, I like you very much. From the first moment I saw you on the screen, and especially now that I have come to know you better." Camilla's mouth went dry. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. "Logan," she breathed out, not immediately finding an answer. "No, let me finish," he asked. "I don't want to put you in an awkward position, but I haven't met such an interesting, beautiful woman for a long time. I know this is an unexpected conversation. Forgive me if this is unnecessary." He looked at her. She sat with her eyes downcast, her hands nervously folded in her lap. "Sorry, I probably shouldn't have," he said more quietly, noticing her silence. Camilla shook her head. "It's okay. I don't know what to say." She felt his fingers lightly touch her hand. "Don't say anything," Logan almost whispered. She looked up and met his gaze, warm and attentive, with a glimmer of emotion he was not hiding. The car was quiet, except for the steady hum of the engine. The next moment, he leaned slowly toward her. Camilla knew she had to stop him, to step back. There was still a chance. Images flashed through her mind. The wedding ring on her finger, Ethan's face. But in that same consciousness, there was a sharp desire to feel desired again, special, to break away for a moment from the usual, correct life. Logan's lips touched hers, gently, questioningly, and Camilla responded. She closed her eyes and let the kiss happen. It seemed like everything around her disappeared for a few seconds. His lips were warm, his hand gently supported her shoulder. The kiss was gentle, almost weightless, and when they pulled away, Camilla could hardly believe that it had actually happened. "I'm sorry," she whispered the first thing that came to mind, feeling her cheeks burning. "Don't apologize," Logan replied quietly. "I'm glad I was right in my guess." She didn't ask what he meant. Her heart was beating too fast, and her mind was frantically trying to justify itself, to find an explanation. But the only feeling that pierced her now was an intoxicating mixture of fear and excitement. The car came to a smooth stop. "We're here," the driver's voice came from the speaker. Camilla shuddered. They had arrived at the very intersection she had named. There was still a block to go to her house. Logan carefully removed his hand, stepping away. "I won't ask you for anything now," he said softly. Just know that I really appreciate the time we spend with you." Camilla nodded silently. She opened the car door and stepped out. The night air washed over her, sobering her up. "Good night, Camilla," Logan said quietly at last. "Good night," she answered and closed the door. The black car drove away smoothly and disappeared around the corner. Camilla stood for a few seconds on the deserted street, feeling her knees tremble. She carefully touched her lips with her fingers. They were still burning from the recent kiss. Conflicting thoughts raced through her head. She had just cheated on her husband. Just one kiss, but the line had already been crossed. Camilla covered her face with her hands. She wanted to cry and laugh at the same time, from shock, from adrenaline, from not understanding what to do next. A minute later, she pulled herself together and walked quickly home. Ethan was probably already asleep or about to go to bed. Did he see anything on her face? No, it was impossible. She had stayed longer than she had promised, but she had warned him that this might happen. "Pretend everything is normal," she ordered herself as she approached the door of her own home. "You didn't do anything wrong. Or did you?" In the darkness of the living room, the screen of the tablet flickered as it was turned off apparently. Ethan was waiting for her until the last moment. Camilla threw her coat over her arm, trying to breathe evenly. A few more minutes, and she could hide in the bathroom, be alone with her thoughts. "You're back," came the sleepy voice of her husband from the bedroom. "Everything okay?" "Yes, sorry for waking you," she responded quietly. "Everything went well. I'll tell you tomorrow. Go to bed and sleep." "Okay. Glad you're home," he muttered. Ethan could be heard turning over. Camilla let out a sigh of relief and walked into the bathroom. She locked the door and leaned her back against the cool tiled wall. In the dim light of the night light, her reflection looked back at her with the same question that was in her head. What have I done? In the days that followed, Camilla's life was divided into two different parts. Mornings and afternoons were the same. Early broadcasts, meetings, household chores at home with Ethan. But after that evening in the car with Logan, everything changed. She had to close her eyes to remember their kiss. The phone in her hand became a constant reminder of temptation. She thought about texting him, apologizing, explaining that it was a mistake. But his message came first. The next day, closer to midday, long after the broadcast had ended and the weekly planning meeting had just ended, Camilla received a text message from an unfamiliar number on her phone. "I can't stop thinking about you. I want to see you again." Camilla's heart jumped. She immediately realized who the message was from. With slightly trembling fingers, she typed out a reply. "I'm thinking about you too. It's all very complicated." The answer was not long in coming. "I know, but maybe you'll stop by for coffee today. I'll be waiting at the cafe at the Montalone Hotel at 5 p.m. Camilla stared at the screen for a long time before typing a short, "Okay." It felt like someone else was texting her instead of her. But at the same time, she already felt a sense of excitement and anticipation. She barely sat still until evening. She couldn't go home. She told her husband on the phone that she had an unscheduled meeting with colleagues. Ethan didn't suspect anything was wrong. This happened when you had to stay late for an editorial discussion or suddenly take an interview. He simply asked her not to forget to eat and wished her luck. At 5 o'clock, Camilla entered the semi-dark lobby of the Montalone Hotel, one of the oldest and most luxurious in the city. In the corner of the lobby, there was a cozy cafe. Soft chairs, quiet music, rare guests at the tables. Logan was waiting for her there. At the sight of Camilla, he immediately stood up and stepped forward. "You came," he said quietly with relief. Camilla nodded, feeling her cheeks flush. She was immediately overcome with embarrassment. Yesterday, she allowed herself to break all the principles, and now here she was again. Logan touched her elbow a little hesitantly. "I'm glad to see you." "Me too," she admitted almost in a whisper. They sat down at a table in the corner. The waitress took their order, cappuccinos for both of them. Although Camilla didn't need any caffeine or warmth right now, everything inside was already burning. There was a pause. Camilla laced her fingers under the table, collecting her thoughts. "Logan, we need to talk," she finally began, looking at the pattern on the tablecloth. "What happened yesterday? It's wrong." He was silent, waiting for him to continue. She plucked up the courage to look into his eyes. There was anxiety in them. "I'm married," she continued. "I'm not the type to cheat. I've never." "Shh, I understand," Logan interrupted softly, covering her hand with his. "Nobody's saying you have to destroy anything in your life. I didn't expect it to turn out like this myself." He stroked her hand, and she found it difficult to concentrate on her prepared arguments. "Maybe we should stop before this goes too far," she said, though her voice wavered. Instead of answering, Logan gently took her hand more tightly. "Look at me, Camilla." She looked. He continued quietly but seriously. "If you say no now, I'll back off. I'll respect any decision you make, but give me an answer from the heart, not the mind. Do you really want it to be just yesterday's kiss, which we both won't forget, but won't repeat? Or do you also feel that there's something special between us?" Camilla couldn't look away. Her heart was pounding loudly again, and it seemed like the whole world had narrowed to the two of them at this table. The words seemed to get stuck in her throat. She knew what the right phrase should be. "Yes, let's forget." But her lips were traitorously silent. Logan leaned forward slightly, not taking his gaze off her. "I think I know your answer," he whispered. Camilla closed her eyes for a moment. Two parts of her soul were fighting inside her, the faithful wife and the woman who was striving for the fire that had flared up next to this man. The waitress brought the coffee, breaking the spell. Camilla stepped back, pretending to stir the sugar. Logan thanked the girl and turned back to Camilla, but he did not insist. He only said quietly, "The decision is yours. I'm not rushing you." For a few languid seconds, Camilla pretended to drink coffee. Her husband's words, vows of fidelity, thoughts about reputation flashed through her head, and next to her was the living embodiment of passion, her secret desire to feel truly alive. She looked up at Logan. Instead of answering, she simply nodded slightly. Logan's eyebrows twitched, and his face took on a look of relief and joy mixed together. He understood without words. "Let's get out of here," he said quietly. "It's too crowded here." A few minutes later, they were riding the elevator up to Logan's room. Camilla barely remembered leaving the cafe or passing the reception desk. Her head was spinning with anticipation and fear. She only felt Logan holding her hand the whole way to the door of her room. As soon as the door to the room closed, Logan took her in his arms. Their lips met again in a hungry kiss, this time without hesitation, without looking back. Camilla seemed to break through. She responded to the kiss with such a feeling as if she feared this was her last chance. Then everything got mixed up. "Are you sure?" he whispered, meeting her gaze for a moment, already hovering over her. "Yes." She breathed out in response, and in this short word was all her desperate determination. After their intimacy, they lay side by side in silence, catching their breath. Logan gently ran his finger down her cheek, brushing away a strand of hair. "You're amazing," he said quietly. Camilla didn't know what to say. She wanted to cry and laugh at the same time. She turned sideways to him, pressing her forehead against his shoulder. Logan hugged her. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly after a minute of silence. "About nothing. I try to think about nothing," she admitted. He nodded understandingly, lightly stroking her hand. "I won't hurt you, Camille. I'm not going to ruin your life," Logan said calmly. "I just want to be with you, for as long as we have." She cringed under those words. They reminded her that all this had to end sooner or later. There was no other way. But right now, she didn't care. The following weeks turned into a series of secret meetings for Camille, stolen hours of happiness mixed with guilt. Logan stayed in New Orleans longer than planned, ostensibly on company business. In practice, he found an opportunity to see her almost every day. Either he would pick her up after a broadcast under the pretext of discussing ideas for the development of the show, or he would invite her to lunch, or simply call her to his hotel room, citing an urgent conversation. Camilla learned to masterfully wriggle out of it, coming up with plausible explanations for Ethan. Either she had lunch with colleagues, or an unscheduled shoot, or a friend asked her to help with preparations for a charity evening. Ethan did not ask unnecessary questions, believing every word. Only occasionally did he raise his eyebrows in surprise that his wife had suddenly become so busy outside of the broadcasts, but she attributed it to new initiatives from her superiors. On those rare evenings when she returned home on time, she and Ethan lived as usual, cooked dinner, watched a series, talked about the news. Camilla found herself trying to be even more affectionate and attentive to her husband, hoping to make amends for the invisible guilt. Sometimes she really did forget for a moment, and everything seemed the same. But as soon as her phone vibrated from another message from Logan, her heart would burst out of her chest, and her thoughts would fly away from the marital home. One night, Camilla woke up to find Ethan not in bed next to her. It turned out he couldn't sleep and had gone to the kitchen to finish writing a report. Camilla came up quietly from behind and put her arm around his shoulders. He looked up from his laptop in surprise. "Hey, is everything okay?" he asked in a low voice. "No, I just decided to check on you." She kissed him on the cheek. "Go back to bed, it's late." Ethan patted her hand affectionately. "Now, I'll finish writing a couple of lines. You go, I'll come." She nodded and went back to the bedroom, lying down on the cold bed. Her heart suddenly sank. Next to her was still her caring husband, and she was living a double life. Such moments were the hardest. She looked at the dark ceiling and thought, how long can I continue like this? But the next day, it all happened again. Meetings with Logan became an addiction that she couldn't give up. He gave her emotions that made her head spin. Passion, admiration, a sense of her own importance. Next to him, she felt desirable, interesting, even more successful. He constantly complimented her intelligence, talent, and joked that any man would be madly happy with such a wife. Sometimes Camilla thought, what if I leave for Logan? But then she pulled herself up short. He hadn't suggested anything like that, and she wasn't ready to ruin the marriage. She thought she was in control of the situation. She could take a little risk and then stop in time. After all, Logan could leave at any moment. Their romance was like a separate little life, hidden from the rest of the world. However, 3 months flew by. Logan did travel to other cities on business, but he always returned, and each time he came they spent as much time together as they could. Camilla could no longer imagine what it would be like when it was all over. She didn't know that the end of this secret affair would be much more abrupt and painful than she could have imagined. 3 months flew by, seemingly in a familiar rhythm, but Ethan Reed began to notice. Something in this rhythm was out of whack. At first, he did not attach importance to the little things. Well, his wife was late at work, who hasn't? She spent an extra hour or two on the set or met with colleagues. This is normal for her field. But when the extra hours began to appear more and more often, Ethan felt a slight anxiety. One evening in late August, he was waiting for Camilla for dinner. She had promised to be home by 7, but it was almost 9, and she was still not home. Ethan put aside the laptop he had been working on late into the night and tried to call his wife. It took 3 tries for the phone to answer. "Hi, sorry." Camilla's voice sounded tired and distant over the connection. "There was a hitch. I had to stay late." "Another unscheduled broadcast?" Ethan asked, trying to hide his disappointment. "Yes, imagine, an urgent release on the occasion of." She hesitated for a split second. "The anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. We were preparing a special segment. It took longer." "I see. Are you coming soon?" "Yes, I'm almost finished. I'm leaving in about 30 minutes. After hanging up, Ethan sat silently for a moment, clutching his phone. Something about her explanation struck him as odd. A Katrina special. But the hurricane's anniversary was last week. Why would they suddenly do a segment tonight? He opened the network's news site. There was no Tonight special listed. The sound of the front door interrupted her thoughts. Camilla had returned a little earlier than she had said, apparently rushing home. Ethan went out to meet her in the hallway. The wife looked tired and a little worried. Her hair was slightly disheveled. There was a mark on her cheek from, apparently, glasses strange. She rarely wears glasses. Her shirt was hanging loose, although it had been tucked in this morning. Camilla took off her shoes as soon as she crossed the threshold and rubbed her feet. "I'm sorry it happened this way," she sighed, not meeting his gaze. "Everything changed at the last moment. I didn't even have time to have dinner." "It's okay, I waited," Ethan answered, trying to speak softly. "How are you? You look exhausted." "Yes, a little." She finally looked at him and smiled, although the corners of her lips twitched. "I want to take a shower and sleep." "Sure, I'll warm up your dinner while you're in the shower," he nodded. Camilla nodded gratefully and went into the bathroom. Ethan watched her go. He noticed a red spot on her neck, like an irritation or a bite, and also a barely perceptible smell of someone else's perfume. Not her own light floral, but something heavier, masculine. Ethan shook off the suspicious thought. Why would she smell like men's perfume? She must have been in contact with one of the guests in the studio or colleagues. He could have hugged her when they met. You never know. In the kitchen, he put a plate of pasta in the microwave. Trying to distract himself, he mentally ran through it. If she really had an urgent broadcast, tomorrow he would probably find a recording in the news archive. It just hadn't been posted today, apparently. He'd check at work. He had access to the TV archives through a friend. When they had finished dinner, or rather, Ethan had eaten again, and Camilla had barely touched her food, he felt a tense silence between them. Usually she chatted about her day, sharing funny stories from the newsroom. Today, almost nothing. She clearly wanted to end the conversations as soon as possible and go to bed. Lying side by side in bed, Ethan couldn't fall asleep for a long time. His wife's even breathing next to him indicated that she was exhausted. He carefully turned his head towards Camilla. In the soft light of the street lamp through the window, he could see her profile, a tired face, slightly furrowed brows even in sleep. He suddenly felt sorry for her. Maybe she really was being driven hard at work. On the other hand, something inside persistently whispered, "No, it's not just about work." The next day, Ethan made a special stop at the TV studio where Camilla worked during his lunch break. He often gave her a ride, but today he decided to surprise her by checking in on her during the day. Usually by midday, her broadcast was over. Ethan's car slid smoothly toward the service entrance. He dialed his wife's number. She answered immediately, her voice urgent. "Yes, Ethan." "Hi, I was thinking of picking you up. Maybe we could have lunch together. I'm right next to your work." There was a pause on the line, then a nervous laugh could be heard. "Oh, I'm not here right now. I went away from editorial business." "Really?" Ethan frowned in surprise, although he tried to sound neutral. "And I'm at your office. Are you far? Maybe I can give you a ride?" "No, no, no need," Camilla responded too quickly. "I'm in the car with a colleague. We'll be back later." "Sorry, another time, okay? I'll call later." She hung up almost without saying goodbye. Ethan remained seated, gripping the steering wheel. He looked around the parking lot. The spot where Camilla's car usually stood was empty, so she really had gone somewhere. There would be nothing strange about that. What if they really were filming on location, if it weren't for the feeling that she was clearly not happy about his sudden appearance? On the contrary, she was alarmed. Ethan spent the rest of the day restless. In the evening at home, he tried to casually ask his wife about her day. Camilla told him incoherently, something about a sudden meeting with advertisers, about having to go to the office of the program's sponsors. She talked a lot, but seemed to avoid specifics. Ethan listened and became more and more convinced she was deceiving him. He barely slept that night. He waited until Camilla's breathing became deep and measured, and then he got out of bed. His heart was constricted with heavy forebodings, but he tried to think rationally. If something was wrong with his wife, he needed to find out what. Ethan quietly made his way into the living room where Camilla had left her purse. He felt like a bastard going through his wife's things, but he couldn't help it. Inside, he found her smartphone. He couldn't unlock it. It seemed she had changed the password, and he didn't dare use the dormant fingerprint. Then he turned on her laptop, which was lying there. Luckily, the laptop booted without a password. The cybersecurity specialist's fingers flew across the keyboard. He knew what he was doing. For 20 minutes, Ethan dug into the system, checking recent documents, browser history, email logins. Nothing suspicious. In desperation, he suddenly noticed a hidden folder on the desktop. The folder name was a random string of characters. Oddly, Camilla wasn't computer savvy enough to hide files. He opened the folder and saw several images. His heart went cold. A photo appeared on the laptop screen. Camilla and Logan Pierce. They were standing too close to each other, somewhere in a dark room. His hand was on her waist. Her face was beaming with a smile, her eyes sparkling with happiness. He hadn't seen her like this in a long time. Ethan frantically scrolled through. Another photo, Logan kissing Camilla on the cheek. The next, they were holding hands, exiting what appeared to be a hotel elevator. These pictures were clear evidence. But who had taken them, and why were they kept by her? Ethan had no answer, but it didn't matter now. He could barely see anything because of the rage and pain. His hands were shaking, but he forced himself to copy the photos to the flash drive he always carried on his keychain. Then he carefully closed all the files, turned off the laptop, and put it back. Ethan didn't sleep a wink that night. His wife, now a stranger to him, was sleeping peacefully in bed next to him. He lay staring into the darkness, thinking only one thing: why? Why did she do this to him? In the early morning, when the sky was just beginning to turn gray, Ethan got up, quietly dressed, and went outside. He needed to be alone with himself. His heart was breaking with anger and pain, but somewhere deep inside, a firm determination was born. He would not allow himself to be made a fool. He needed proof even more reliable. Those photos might have been an accident, or someone would call them a joke. No, he would do everything wisely. Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed the number of his friend, a private detective he had met on the job. It was only 5 in the morning, but Ethan didn't care. He was going to take action immediately. "Hello, Tom. Sorry for calling early," he said dully into the phone. "I need your help. I seem to have a problem, of a personal nature." Ethan stood at the window of the detective agency office, watching the streets empty at dawn. At the desk next to him, private investigator Tom Dolan was looking through the files Ethan had given him on his laptop. The room was tensely silent. "That's enough," Tom finally said quietly, looking at the pictures on the screen. "If it's needed for court, it's quite convincing." Ethan just nodded, clenching his fists in his jacket pockets. He had felt like he was operating on autopilot for the last 24 hours. He turned to Tom, handed him copies of the photos he had found, and briefly explained the situation. The detective, an old friend, responded with sympathy and professional zeal. "You said he owns a media holding?" Tom asked, flipping through the photos. "This, Logan Pierce?" "Yes," replied Ethan dryly. "Well then, let's add an observation to this. I need dates, times when they meet. Any ideas?" Ethan rubbed his eyes tiredly. "She always says that she works late or meets with colleagues, most often after the broadcast, during the day or in the evenings. I think he is often in New Orleans now, since they are having an affair. Let's check the hotels." The detective nodded, taking out a notebook. "You say he's rich and influential? He probably stays in the best hotels. I'll get my man at the reception at Montalone involved according to your information. He invited her there." Ethan remembered that day at the cafe in Montalone when Camilla had lied about editorial business. Bitterness rose in his throat. "Yes, she was there then, I'm sure." "Good. I'll follow her route tomorrow after the broadcast," Tom said decisively. "And what will you do?" Ethan turned away from the window, his eyes filled with cold determination. "Collect everything I can. Call logs, correspondence. I have access to her phone account. I'll try to pull out a list of incoming numbers." And he clenched his jaw and tried to control himself. Tom nodded understandingly. "Hold on, buddy. Don't do anything stupid. Trust me with this matter. I'll figure it out." Ethan silently shook the detective's hand and left the office. In the weeks that followed, Ethan lived as if he were a stranger to himself. He continued to smile at Camille in the morning, go to work, discuss projects with colleagues, but his entire real life was focused on collecting evidence. Detective Tom was up to the task. Within a few days, he provided new photographs and surveillance reports. The photos, taken from a car with a long lens, show Camille and Logan Pierce in different locations around the city. Here they are, walking into the same Montalone hotel together, Camille looking around with her scarf pulled up to her chin. Here they are, dining at a window table in a quiet restaurant in the Marigny district, their heads close together, clearly infatuated with each other, no one else they know around them. And here is a couple who look suspiciously like them, kissing in a parked car on a deserted Mississippi embankment in the dead of night. As Ethan looked at the material on his computer screen, he felt both disgust and a strange sense of relief. Now everything was finally confirmed. Every lie Camilla had been visually confirmed. Now he didn't doubt it for a second. For his part, he wasn't sitting idle either. As a cybersecurity specialist, Ethan knew how to get information. He managed to get Camilla's cell phone call details through personal connections. The list had repeatedly included the same number with a Washington area code over the past few months. Logan Pierce lived in Washington, Ethan quickly discovered. Obviously, it was his number they talked for hours, especially in the evenings and at night, when Ethan thought his wife had simply stepped out onto the porch for a breather or was staying late in the studio. The pain of these discoveries gradually transformed into cold rage. Ethan did not make a scene, did not show that he knew anything. On the contrary, he did everything so as not to scare Camilla away prematurely. She, carried away by her secret affair, seemed not to notice anything. Perhaps, deep down, she suspected that the truth could come out, but she was too blinded by passion. One day in mid-September, at dinner, Camilla casually remarked, "The channel has a big gala in a couple of weeks. Remember I told you? It's a corporate event. I have to be there as the host of the morning show." She added in a deliberately calm tone, "There will probably only be employees and management there without any invitees, so you might be bored." Ethan, holding his fork, feigned mild disappointment. "It's a pity. I thought I'd finally get to wear my suit." He tried to speak humorously. Camilla smiled faintly. "Sorry, there will be an official reception. Speech is nothing interesting." "Of course, nothing." He nodded conciliatorily. "You have to go, and I'll stay at home and enjoy my rest." Inside, he could barely contain his anger. That meant she didn't even want to take him. Apparently, she intended to show up there with Logan. Ethan clenched his teeth, trying not to show his emotions. "By the way, I can stop by Nora's after the event," Camilla added unexpectedly, looking down at her plate. "She invited me to a movie night since I missed her birthday last week." "Good idea," Ethan replied calmly, although he was surprised. Nora, Camilla's cousin, lived next door to Camilla's parents in another part of town. She and Camilla were friends, but Ethan didn't know that his wife was planning to catch up after the party. He didn't show it, though. "Yes, I promised her," Camilla nodded, drinking water too quickly. Ethan noted that detail, a backup excuse for not sleeping in after the gala, probably planning to spend the night with Pierce. He felt anger and pain inside, but he forced himself to finish his dinner peacefully. That same night, he called Tom and described the new information. The detective only whistled into the receiver. "So they have a date at the gala. We'll be there." "Yes," Ethan confirmed firmly. "We will." The day of the corporate gala arrived. The event was widely discussed in the local industry. Pierce Media Group was celebrating a merger with another TV network, and the party promised to be lavish. Camilla had been unusually animated and excited since the morning Ethan had seen her carefully choosing a dress, applying professional makeup at home. She told him that she was nervous about interacting with so many important people. "You'll do just fine," Ethan told her calmly, helping her fasten the bracelet. Inside, he was seething, but on the outside, he maintained the mask of a loving husband. "Don't worry and enjoy yourself." Camilla looked dazzling. A golden floor-length dress emphasized her figure. Her curls were styled impeccably. When she came out of the bedroom, Ethan even smiled wryly. It's a pity I can't go. You would have outshone everyone there. She was slightly embarrassed by the compliment. Thank you. I really care how I look today. I'm sure someone out there will appreciate it, he added quietly under his breath, and Camilla didn't hear. She left early, citing preparation and rehearsal. Ethan immediately contacted Tom. The detective was already in position. He had planted his man from the technical staff on the set to help connect to the equipment. Ethan was going there too, unofficially. He changed into a dark suit he had once worn to a wedding and left half an hour later. In the glove compartment of the car was a flash drive with a carefully prepared video. The plan was simple and bold. During one of the presentations in the evening, not the company's official newsreel would be shown on the screens, but an edited video featuring Camilla and Logan. The video would contain the most eloquent photographs, correspondence, and call excerpts. Everything that could be collected. Ethan did not want to leave a shadow of a doubt that his wife and the head of the holding company had violated all conceivable boundaries. As dusk fell on the city, Ethan took up position near the Gala venue. The event was held in a historic mansion in the French Quarter, a grand ballroom decorated with flowers and branded banners. Music and chatter could be heard from the street. Ethan waited in a nearby alley, in the shade of an old oak tree. His heart was beating dully, and evenly he was extremely calm, as if numb. Everything was going according to plan. He took out his phone and wrote a short message to Tom. I'm here. Everything is ready. The answer came instantly. Okay, I'll give you the sign in 5 minutes. It's time. Ethan took a deep breath and stepped out of the darkness, heading for the side door where Tom's friend, a sound engineer from the technical staff, was waiting for him. The dirt was ready to fall on the heads of those present. The noise of the social gathering gradually filled the luxurious hall of the mansion. Muffled conversations, the clink of glasses, and soft jazz music were heard everywhere. Camilla, dressed in her best gold dress, smiled at the guests, but inside she was barely managing to contain her nerves. Logan Pierce was next to her, barely moving an inch. He looked impeccable, a tuxedo, confident posture, an easy smile for everyone who came up to say hello. The formal part of the evening was just getting underway. On the stage by the wall, department heads took turns giving speeches about the successes of the Pierce Media Group holding company and the upcoming merger with a new television network. Camilla listened with half an ear, nodding to acquaintances. She had drunk a glass of champagne too quickly to calm her nerves, and now she felt a little dizzy. It seemed to her that everyone around her could read the secret on her face, that her hand occasionally touched Logan's under the tablecloth, that every whisper in his ear made her blush. Calm down, everything is going great, Logan said quietly, leaning toward her under the pretext of telling her something. His hand rested on the back of her chair. You look amazing. Relax and enjoy the evening. Camilla nodded, trying to smile naturally. She glanced around. Many colleagues and guests were actually smiling at her. Some came up to exchange a few words. No one would have guessed that the brilliant host of the morning show was having an affair with the boss himself. Robert Burns, the CEO of the channel, came to their table several times. He exchanged pleasantries with Logan and a few words with Camilla about work matters. Camilla behaved professionally, hoping that Burns did not suspect anything about her relationship with the owner of the holding company. However, Logan behaved rather reservedly. He allowed himself only rare short touches when no one was looking. Soon the main dinner was over, and the guests' attention turned to the stage. There, a presentation was announced, a kind of final video about the company's achievements for the year. The video was supposed to appear on the screen behind the stage. Now there's going to be boring officialdom, Logan grimaced playfully, quietly addressing Camilla. Let's look at growth figures and office photos. She smiled back, feeling her heart pounding with joy. The evening was almost over, which meant soon. She gave Logan a meaningful look, and he nodded slightly. They had agreed to meet later that night, when it was all over. The thought of it made Camilla almost as excited as the evening itself. At that moment, the lights in the hall were dimmed, drawing the audience's attention to the screen. The first shots of the presentation appeared. the familiar corporate logo, the solemn music. Camilla sighed furtively, preparing to sit through the required few minutes of formality. However, after a few seconds, what was happening on the screen made her straighten up and tense up. Instead of slides with graphs, a photo suddenly flashed by. Her own photo. Camilla blinked, not believing her eyes. For a split second, she herself appeared on the screen laughing, with a glass in her hand. The scene changed. Now everyone could see her at Marigny's restaurant, leaning close to a man. It was Logan, his face clearly visible in profile. Someone gasped out loud. Camilla's heart went cold. She recognized the pictures. They had been taken secretly when she and Logan had dinner alone. "What the?" Logan hissed next to him, jumping up from his chair. The guests began to exchange glances and whisper. A slideshow was playing on the screen, and the frames changed one after another, increasingly incriminating. Here she and Logan enter the hotel together. The name on the entrance is clearly visible, and their figures, even though they were trying to hide under an umbrella. Here is a shot of Logan kissing her cheek in the parking lot. Next comes a scan of the correspondence. On a black background, the words, "I can't wait to see you again," are highlighted in large letters. It's a message from Logan, and underneath it is her reply. "I miss you too. It was a wonderful night." Camilla felt dizzy. This was a nightmare, an unthinkable scandal, and it was happening in real life, in front of everyone. She glanced at Logan. Pierce's face was flushed with anger, his jaw clenched. Robert Burns, standing nearby, dropped his glass of champagne on the floor. There were shouts. Several people gasped. Someone seemed to whistle softly. Camilla wanted to disappear into the ground. She looked around frantically. Where was Ethan? It couldn't be that he had done this. But her mind told her otherwise. There was no one else. There was a commotion in the room. 2 employees rushed to the control room, apparently trying to turn off the projector. But the presentation had already done its job. The last thing to appear was a large shot of Camilla and Logan kissing in a car, and below that, a caption in white letters on black, "Thank you for your attention. Ethan Reed." Camilla caught her breath. This was the final point, her husband's signature, confirming his authorship of the revelation. For a few seconds, a tense silence hung in the room, broken only by the crackle of the projector and the rustle of the confused technician's footsteps. Logan was the first to come to his senses. He stepped forward, looking menacingly at the frozen guests. "The evening is over," he said loudly, trying to drown out the noise in the hall. "I ask everyone to leave the hall immediately." Several guards at the entrances hesitated, unsure of how to react. But most of the guests were happy to retreat. Confusion and scandal had engulfed the hall. People hurried toward the exit, stealthily casting stunned glances at Camilla. She stood like a statue, unable to move. It seemed that her body had stopped obeying her from shame and horror. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I need to get you out of here," Logan hissed in her ear, grabbing her elbow. "Now." But before they could take a step, Ethan appeared from somewhere to the right. Camilla saw her husband as if in a fog, a pale, determined face, cold fury in his eyes. He was dressed in a formal dark suit, although formally he was not supposed to be a guest of the evening. Logan also noticed Ethan's appearance and released Camille's elbow, stepping between them. "Are you crazy?" Pierce hissed, glaring at Ethan. "Do you have any idea?" "One more step and you'll regret this," Ethan said quietly but clearly. The phone flashed in his hand, as if to suggest he had more cards to play. Logan jerked forward, but stopped himself. Camilla, sobbing, covered her face with her hands. There was almost no one left around them, only a security guard, and a few top managers who were talking in shock at a distance. Burns, flushed, stood slightly behind Ethan and seemed hesitant to intervene. "Camilla Reed," Ethan said loudly, looking straight at his wife. He called her by her last name, as if this were a court. "I am officially filing for divorce, starting tomorrow." Camilla began to cry out loud. She begged with her eyes, but could not utter a word. Ethan only grinned. There was no joy in his smile, only bitterness. "You pathetic bastard," Logan hissed, obviously aimed at Ethan. I will destroy you for this. I doubt it, Ethan said calmly. You'll have enough troubles without me right now. He glanced coldly at both of them and turned to leave. For a second his eyes met Camilla's. She saw only pain and hatred in them. A moment later, Ethan was already quickly leaving the empty hall without looking back. Logan put his arm around Camilla's shoulders, trying to lead her out of the room. But she pulled away. Don't touch me, she sobbed, wiping away the smeared tears and mascara with her palm. Despair and anger were growing in her chest. You started this. SHH, quiet, Logan hissed. We need to leave now before the press gets wind of this. He forced her toward the side exit. Camilla staggered on her heels, feeling completely broken. One thought pulsated in her head. It's over. Everything is lost. The night air cooled her flushed face. Logan almost forced Camille out onto the deserted street behind the mansion, where there was a back entrance for service personnel. His driver was already waiting at the curb in a car. Get inside quickly, Pierce said shortly, holding Camilla by the elbow. She staggered into the back of the limo. Logan jumped in after her and slammed the door. The car immediately pulled away. For a few seconds there was a tense silence in the cabin, broken only by their ragged breathing. Camilla was sobbing, trying to stop her sobs. Her hands were shaking, her heart was pounding like crazy. How could he? She finally exhaled, staring ahead with an unseeing gaze. How? Logan cursed under his breath and slammed his fist into the soft leather armrest. Damn it, that bastard planned it all. Damn him. Camilla winced at these words and finally turned her gaze to Logan. In the dim light of the lantern, she could see that he was beside himself with rage. His face was contorted, his nostrils flared, his eyes darting about. You promised that no one would find out, she said unexpectedly in a weak, accusing tone. What? He turned to her, frowning. You blame me? Camilla was silent, pressing her hands to her chest. Meanwhile, the driver drove the car along the deserted night streets, trying not to pay attention to the conversation behind him. Listen, Logan held back his irritation and spoke harshly, but more quietly. There's no time to look for someone to blame. We need to figure out how to get out of this. She smiled bitterly, feeling a pang of despair. You still have a job, money, power. But me, no career, no husband now. She didn't dare say no reputation, but the thought hung in the air. Logan clenched his jaw. I won't let you get fired. I'll talk to Burns, to the board of directors. We'll think of something. Maybe we'll say it's all fake, blackmail. Camilla shook her head. She imagined the faces of her colleagues who had seen it all with their own eyes. How could she get out of this? No one will believe it, she whispered. It was all there, so clear. A lump in her throat choked her voice. She closed her eyes, holding back another onslaught of tears with all her might. Logan cursed again, but more quietly. He seemed to be calming down and considering the consequences. Okay, listen, I'm taking you home now. You'd better wait a day or two in the shadows. Don't show up at work or anywhere. I'll contact the right people myself. I'll sort it out. They won't touch you. Home, Camilla echoed. Her heart sank painfully. There was emptiness waiting for her at home. No Ethan, no support. Maybe I shouldn't go home. I can't see anyone right now. She remembered her mother saying that her parents would probably find out by now. She wanted to disappear. Then, let's take you to the hotel, Logan decided. You'll spend the night there. She didn't react at all. She didn't care where she was going. The world was collapsing around her. The car turned, changing its route. Logan pulled out his phone and began frantically texting someone. Camilla stared out the window at the passing lights of the night city. Just a few hours ago, she had dreamed of this twilight. It was supposed to be full of passion and mystery. Now the night had turned into a nightmare. The limo pulled up at the service entrance of the Hotel Montalone, the same hotel where Logan and she had secretly met more than once. Ironically, she was now hiding there from her own shame. Come on, Logan took her arm, but she immediately pulled it away. He gave her a displeased look, but said nothing. They went through a side entrance so as not to attract attention in the lobby. Logan said something briefly to the manager, and they were immediately escorted into the elevator. A minute later, Camilla was standing in a luxurious room on the 12th floor. The same marble tables, velvet chairs before, everything here seemed like a setting for romance, but now it seemed like a prison. "Stay here," Logan said, closing the door behind him. "I'll take care of this for now. Don't go out with anyone." He didn't even try to calm her down or hug her. Camilla was left alone. Only when his footsteps died away behind the door did she finally give up. She burst into tears and slid down the wall to the floor. It seemed to her that this was the end of everything. How could she have lost everything in a couple of hours? Her beloved husband. Even though yesterday it seemed that they had drifted apart, he had been close to her for so many years. Her dream job, she told herself that she had done everything for the sake of her career, and now her career was over. And love, this forbidden love, for which she had taken a risk, had turned into a collapse. "How did I get to this point?" she repeated out loud, without even noticing. But no one heard her except the walls. In the morning, reality asserted itself with renewed vigor. Camilla woke up on a wide bed in the room. She hadn't noticed how she had moved from the floor to the bed, probably in the early morning. Her head was splitting, her eyes were swollen and sore. Sunbeams filtered through the curtains. The phone vibrated on the nightstand. Camilla had trouble focusing her eyes. The screen showed dozens of missed calls. Mom, Dad, several colleagues. Even Nora's number was blinking on the list. With a heavy heart, she pressed her mother's contact and held the phone to her ear. "Camilla," an excited and angry voice rang out. "Finally, what happened there?" "Ethan called us. He said that everyone at the corporate party saw some horrible photos. My God, daughter, is this really true?" Camilla closed her eyes. Apparently, Ethan hadn't hesitated. He had managed not only to announce the divorce, but also to call her parents. She imagined what it must have been like for them to hear something like that. "Mom," she began hoarsely, but her voice broke. "Is it true?" The mother almost screamed. "You cheated on him? In front of the whole world? I don't believe it. I can't believe it. Where are you now?" I'm so sorry," Camilla squeezed out, feeling tears welling up in her throat again. "Mom, later." But the mother was already crying on the phone from humiliation and anger. "What have you done? What have you done, Cammy? Such a husband. Such a golden boy, Ethan. How could you? He's like a son to us. Lord, how can I look people in the eye now?" Each of her exclamations caused her unbearable pain. Camilla could not stand it. "Mom, I'll explain later. I'm sorry," she groaned and ended the call. The phone immediately vibrated again. This time it was her father. Camilla pressed her hand to her mouth, holding back a sob. She didn't have the strength to answer. She rose, unsteadily, and went into the bathroom. The mirror reflected a pale, swollen face, a stranger's face. Logan's words from the previous day came back to her. "I won't let you get fired." Almost immediately, as if in answer to her thought, a signal from the bedside table sounded. She went back into the room and picked up her phone. A text from Logan. "The board of directors wants you to resign to hush up the scandal. I tried to object, but so far they insist. Don't sign anything until I talk to them again." Camilla's hands shook as she held the phone. Dismissal. That was the end. No matter how you twisted it, it would be impossible to keep her on the air. Reputational costs, she would understand that herself someday, but facing them now was excruciating. Before she could process the message, a call from Burns, the CEO of the channel, appeared on the screen. Camilla froze. She couldn't help but answer. She swiped her finger across the screen. "Yes." Her voice was barely audible. "Camilla," Burns's voice was distant and formal. "You can probably guess why I'm calling." "Yes." She bit her lip until it hurt. "I spoke with the holding's management, and they're asking me to write a letter of resignation. Today, The sooner, the better. No questions, no attempts to find out her version, everything was already decided. Camilla closed her eyes tightly, swallowed a lump. "I understand," she answered bluntly. The director hesitated for a second. "I'm sorry it all turned out this way," he muttered, perhaps the only sincere thing he could say. "You were a good presenter." The word was finally broke her. "Tell Logan that the statement will be today," Camilla said crisply and pressed end call, not listening to another word. The phone fell out of her hands onto the carpet. She realized she was sitting right on the bathroom floor, her back against the wall. It's over. Ethan is getting a divorce. Her parents are turning their backs. Her job is gone. In an instant, Camilla Tate's life is completely destroyed. She thought absently, what about Logan? He would, of course, lead the settlement of the situation, but he was unlikely to risk his career for her now. Most likely, this message was the last she would receive from him on the matter. Their relationship was doomed. For some reason, this thought caused almost no pain. There was nowhere else it could hurt more. She had to gather her courage, somehow move on. But Camilla had no idea how. She felt completely alone. 2 days after the ill-fated evening, Camilla returned to her home, or rather, to the house that had recently been filled with their family comfort. Now, every corner here was a reminder of lost happiness. She unlocked the door with her key. The hallway was dark and quiet. Ethan had apparently not been home since yesterday. Perhaps he was deliberately avoiding the meeting. There was an envelope on the coffee table in the living room. It had her name on it in a familiar handwriting. Ethan had written her notes like that before. Camilla's heart sank, and she tore the envelope open and pulled out the piece of paper. In a few lines, Ethan officially announced that he had filed for divorce because of her infidelity. He asked her to pack her personal belongings and leave the house by the end of the week. The house had belonged to him before the marriage, so it remained his by law. At the end, a note, "All contacts through my lawyer." No name, no wishes, nothing personal. The piece of paper trembled in her hands. She had expected it, but the reality hurt. 3 years of marriage reduced to a dry letter. Camilla slowly sank down onto the sofa. How many evenings she and Ethan had spent here, hugging, discussing her broadcasts or his projects. She ran her fingers over the worn upholstery. Tears were quietly flowing down her cheeks, but she didn't have the strength to cry out loud. All emotions seemed to have been burned out in the last few days. She had to hurry leave this now foreign place as soon as possible. Having risen, Camilla went to the bedroom and took out her suitcase. She began to mechanically fold her clothes. Some things a gift from her parents for their wedding anniversary. Framed photos of them together she simply couldn't touch. She left them lying there. It became unbearably painful to look at each detail. There was the box Ethan had given her for their first Christmas together. The necklace he had given her last winter. She carefully put the jewelry back. There was no point in taking it. It had lost its meaning. In about 2 hours, everything necessary was packed. A suitcase and a couple of boxes with books and personal items. The rest furniture, equipment was left to Ethan. Camilla already felt that she had no right to claim anything. Moreover, her own lawyer confirmed this by phone in the morning. Due to proven infidelity, she could not count on either division of property or alimony. Louisiana laws were strict towards the guilty party. She looked out the bedroom window. The taxi she had called in advance had pulled up. The driver was waiting at the gate. It was time. Camilla glanced around the empty room. Her wedding dress still hung in the corner in its sheath, once a family heirloom. Now the symbol seemed mocking. Camilla turned away and hurried toward the exit. At the threshold of the house, she came face to face with Nora. The cousin was standing on the porch, apparently about to make a phone call. Nora was holding a container of food in her hands. Camilla stopped, confused. Nora looked at her carefully. Her gaze showed both pity and condemnation at the same time. "Hello," Camilla said hoarsely. "Hi." Nora didn't answer right away. She glanced at the suitcase in her sister's hand and the boxes by the door. "Are you going too?" "I'm leaving," Camilla confirmed bitterly, "as you can see." Nora nodded and looked down. I came to check on Ethan, she said quietly. He's gone, isn't he? No, Camilla swallowed. He doesn't want to see me. Nora remained silent, only pressing her lips together. Camilla suddenly felt an urgent need to justify herself to her, almost the only one in the family who had decided to come. Nora, she began, but didn't know what to say. I'm sorry, I'll explain. How can you explain something you don't really understand? Nora raised her hand to stop her. No need. I won't scold you or justify you. It's just, I'm sorry it's like this, Nora spoke calmly, but her eyes sparkled. But Cammy, you chose it yourself. These words sounded like a sentence. Camilla lowered her head, holding back tears. Take care of yourself, okay? Nora added, a little more gently. And, if you need help, I'm here, no matter what. Camilla looked at her cousin in surprise. She smiled weakly, through force, but sincerely. Thank you, Camilla whispered. Nora nodded briefly, and they hugged, tight and quick. Then Nora hurried into the house, and Camilla grabbed her suitcase and boxes and headed for a taxi. Time blurred. She barely remembered how she got to the rented apartment she had managed to find on the sly. That evening, she sat on the floor of her new home, a tiny one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of New Orleans, and stared into space. There were boxes all around her, and a half-empty closet with doors gaping. She had to rent a place herself. She did not dare to return to her parents, and they did not invite her, communicating only through short, cold calls. Her mother said, I hope you will come to your senses and apologize to everyone. Her father refused to talk at all, and then a former colleague from the channel called and conveyed advice. It is better not to show herself publicly for now and wait it out. Wait it out. Camilla smiled bitterly to herself. What to wait for now? She took the divorce papers out of her bag, fortunately. They promised to process the process quickly in the absence of disputes. Just a couple of signatures, and that was it. Her gaze fell on her own name, Camilla Reed. More precisely, Tate again, one must assume. Returning to her maiden name was also part of the retribution. Several new messages were flashing on the phone screen. One was from Logan, a dry, "How are you?" She didn't even bother to answer. He hadn't called since that morning text message. Apparently, the issue with her job had resolved itself. Burns had sent her a copy of the order of dismissal, already issued. No explanation, but it was all clear anyway. Another message was from an unknown number, as it turned out later, from a reporter from a local newspaper. He asked for a comment on the leak of scandalous footage. Camilla shuddered and immediately deleted it. The last thing she needed was to justify herself in the tabloids. The sun set, the apartment plunged into semi-darkness. Camilla continued to sit on the floor. There were no thoughts left, only emptiness. Somewhere on the kitchen cabinet stood a laptop. A belated idea flashed, maybe record a video message, apologize to everyone. To Ethan, to the audience. But she didn't even have the strength to get up. She just sat and stared at the blank wall as the last light of the day slowly faded outside the window. Ethan Reed sat on the veranda of his own house and watched the sun slowly sink over the neighbors' roofs. Crickets chirped softly in the yard. A warm October evening was approaching. He had a mug of already cold tea in his hand, but he did not notice. His thoughts were far away. 2 days ago, the divorce was officially finalized. Ethan received a notice from his lawyer. The marriage was dissolved. Camilla agreed to all the conditions. The process went quickly apparently. She also wanted to put an end to it as soon as possible. But Ethan didn't feel any relief. It didn't get any easier. Yes, he had achieved his goal. He had taken revenge on his offenders. He had defended his pride. But the devastation had not gone away. The house seemed strange and empty without his wife's usual laughter, without the smell of her perfume in the morning. Sometimes, when he entered the bedroom, he caught himself expecting to see Camilla Blow drying her hair or putting on makeup in front of the mirror, getting ready for the broadcast. Then reality hit. He was alone now. Footsteps sounded on the path leading to the house. Ethan looked up and saw Nora. Camilla's cousin, wearing a light summer dress, was carrying a paper bag of groceries. She had called him that morning, asking if she could come over that evening to bring home some food. Ethan hadn't objected. Frankly, he was desperately missing someone's presence. "Hello," he said quietly as Nora stepped onto the porch. "Come in." Nora smiled softly and picked up the bag. "I cooked a little here. I think you didn't have time, and probably weren't in the mood either." Ethan remembered that he had only eaten a sandwich all day. He stood up, motioning for her to come into the house. "Thank you, you are very welcome." They went into the kitchen. Nora habitually took plates and cutlery out of the cupboard. She had visited them with Camilla many times. Everything here was familiar to her. She warmed up a casserole in the microwave and sliced fresh bread. A few minutes later, they were sitting across the table from each other. Ethan tried to push away the awkwardness. A few weeks ago, he had only seen Nora at family gatherings, his wife's sweet cousin, always friendly, but nothing more. And now here she was, the only person close to him. "How are you?" Nora asked cautiously, breaking the silence. Ethan shrugged. It would be unfair to complain. Everything is fair. He got what he wanted. He got divorced. He grinned colorlessly. Nora looked down at her plate. "The mothers are very worried," she said quietly. "Your mother and Aunt Margaret. Probably the most of all." Camilla's mother, Aunt Margaret, was Nora's biological aunt. Ethan winced. "I feel sorry for them. I didn't want to. It all came out so publicly, but otherwise." He waved his hand, leaving the thought unspoken. Nora nodded understandingly. "I know. It just still hurts. For everyone." She put down her fork and looked up at him. "We all love you, you know. You were the best husband for Camilla. No one is making excuses for her." Ethan met her gaze and saw that Nora had tears in her eyes. That touched him more than his own grief. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for being here now, for your support." Nora squeezed his hand tightly in response. "How could I not come?" she whispered. "You're not a stranger to me." There was a moment of silence between them. Ethan was suddenly acutely aware that he did not feel alone at this moment. It seemed unexpected, but Nora's presence was warming. He gently let go of her hand so as not to embarrass her. "Can you tell me how you are?" He changed the subject a little more cheerfully. "How is work, school?" Nora made an attempt to distract herself. She began to talk about her daily life. She worked as a librarian in the city library and at the same time took courses in literary crafts. She said how she tried to write stories in her free time. Ethan listened with genuine interest. Before, with Camille, he hadn't really delved into Nora's life. She was 5 years younger, a quiet, family girl. But now he found himself thinking that he was pleased to learn more about her. Her quiet voice, her smooth gestures, everything had a calming effect. At dinner, for the first time in a long time, he felt something calm. They even smiled a couple of times at memories. Nora reminded him of the barbecue they had together last summer at Camille's parents', and Ethan had gotten a sunburn, and she and Camille had rubbed aloe vera on him. Ethan shook his head with a sad smile. It seemed like a lifetime ago. Finally, dinner came to an end. Nora began to pack up the containers. "Leave it, I'll wash it later," Ethan stopped her. "Thank you, really. Without you, I don't know what I'd do." She was a little embarrassed by his gratitude. "Don't exaggerate. I lost. A sister, you could say, too." Nora looked away. "Cammy was like a sister to me, even though she was a cousin. Now, I don't know how to feel about her." Ethan understood that Nora was torn between her sympathy for him and her familial love for Camilla, no matter how she had sinned. "She's probably feeling very bad right now," he said quietly, unexpectedly for himself. Nora looked at him in amazement. "Do you still feel sorry for her?" Ethan shook his head. "No, I'm just stating it. I won't forgive her for this, but I don't feel any particular joy either. It still hurts." Nora was silent for a moment, then said, "You're a good man, Ethan." He smiled bitterly. "After this, anyone would doubt what I am like." Nora suddenly objected firmly, almost sternly. Don't you dare say that. You did what you thought was right. It may seem cruel, but I don't blame you. And no one else does. She came around the table and suddenly hugged him. Ethan was taken aback, but then he wrapped his arms around her fragile shoulders. His sarcasm and feigned indifference disappeared in that warm, sincere embrace. He felt a tear suddenly roll down his cheek, the first he had allowed himself in all this time. "It'll be okay," Nora whispered to him. "You can handle it." Her hair tickled his chin, smelling of jasmine. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, taking in her warmth. For the first time, the oppressive emptiness in his soul receded. Finally, they pulled away at once, slightly embarrassed. Nora wiped a tear from the corner of his eye with her finger and smiled. And here come the emotions. Ethan laughed quietly through the remaining tears, short but sincere. He walked Nora to the porch. In the twilight, fireflies began to appear and crickets began to chirp. "Thank you again," he repeated, looking into her eyes. "Contact me if anything happens," she answered softly. "I'm nearby." Ethan nodded. He didn't want to let her go at that moment, but he just watched her head toward her car. Nora looked back, waved, and soon drove away, disappearing into the warm southern evening. Ethan stood on the porch for a long time, feeling the tension in his chest gradually release. Unexpectedly for himself, he thought about how lucky he was to have such a close person nearby. Inside, a timid feeling was born that life did not end here. A month passed. Autumn had fully come into its own in New Orleans. The days became shorter. A cool breeze blew off the river in the evenings. Ethan's life was relatively calm. He immersed himself in work on a new project, trying to fill the time with things to do. But the main thing was that Nora was almost constantly by his side that month. She visited him every few days. Sometimes she would bring him dinner. Sometimes she would invite him for a walk. Sometimes she would just drop in to see how he was. Gradually, these meetings became a natural part of their everyday life. They went to his parents' house together for the weekend. Ethan's mother was glad that her son was not alone. Sometimes Nora invited him for walks along the shore of Lake Pontchartrain, where they would talk for hours about everything under the sun. One such Sunday, toward the end of October, Ethan and Nora were walking in the park near the lake. Yellow and purple leaves rustled under their feet. Nora was telling a funny story about her literature students, waving her arms for emphasis. Ethan looked at her with a smile. He suddenly found himself not listening to the words for several minutes, simply admiring the way the strands of her chestnut hair turned golden in the rays of the low sun, the lively sparkle in her eyes. Nora's laughter rang out like a bell, bringing him back to reality. "Hey, mister, can you hear me?" "Sorry, I was daydreaming," Ethan said, embarrassed. She playfully nudged him with her shoulder. "Well, what are we dreaming about?" He hesitated for a moment. His heart began to beat faster. It was time to admit to himself. He felt good with Nora. Warm, easy, reliable. Over this month, she had become more than just a friend to him, something more. Someone who gave him back his taste for life. "You know," Ethan began, stopping under a spreading oak tree. Nora stopped too, looking at him questioningly. "I don't think I've thanked you properly in a long time." Nora smiled. "Oh, come on, how much gratitude can you give? It was important for me to be there. You are a close person to me too. I don't even know when it happened, but—" She bit her lip, as if afraid she had said too much. Ethan felt a thrill of joy. "I have a guess when," he said softly. "Maybe that evening when you and I were sitting in my kitchen. For the first time in a long time, I felt that I was not alone." Nora's cheeks turned pink. She looked down. "I also felt that I want you to feel good, like no one else." Ethan took her hand gently. She didn't take it away. "Nora," he said almost in a whisper, "you are the most precious thing to me right now. I'm afraid to rush things, but—" He took a tiny step closer. Their faces were very close. In Nora's eyes, he saw the reflection of the sunset sky and his own reflection, too. "But," she asked quietly, waiting for him to continue, her breathing quickening. "But I think I'm falling in love with you," Ethan finally breathed out frankly. Her heart nearly jumped out of her chest in anticipation of the answer. Nora raised her eyelashes in surprise, then smiled warmly and happily. "Me too," she whispered, laughing sheepishly through the tears that had suddenly welled up in her eyes. "Honestly, I thought I was imagining it. I couldn't believe it." Ethan didn't let her finish. He wrapped his arms around Nora, holding her close. She closed her eyes, and their lips met in their first gentle kiss. This kiss was different from anything they had experienced in the last month. There was no secret sin in it, no pain, only a trembling joy and hope. Ethan kissed Nora tenderly, feeling her tremble in his arms, with excitement, not fear. He knew they were both afraid to rush this fragile new feeling. Finally, they pulled away, exhaling simultaneously. Nora hid her face in his chest, embarrassed, and Ethan stroked her hair. "It seems like everything will definitely be fine now," he whispered, leaning towards her ear. Nora pressed herself closer to him. "Only if we're careful. Are you sure? It's not too early." She looked up at him with concern. Ethan nodded. "We don't have to report to anyone. Yes, it all happened quickly. People probably won't understand right away, but I don't care. I want to be with you." Nora smiled through her tears. "I want to be with you too, Ethan." They stood for a few more minutes, embracing under the old oak tree. Autumn leaves swirled around them in the air, showering the ground around them. In the rays of the setting sun, the two people found each other, finding a new feeling that gave them hope for the future. Ahead of them were conversations with their families, cautious steps toward a shared future. Perhaps not everyone around them would approve of their union, at least not right away. Both Ethan and Nora understood this. But at that moment, it did not matter. The main thing was that they could both smile again and look forward together. December brought cool temperatures and sparse golden leaves to New Orleans. In her small apartment on the outskirts of town, Camille Tate opened the window to the crisp morning air. She looked out at the street. Life was going on as usual. People were rushing about their business. At this time of year, she would have been in the TV studio, rereading the script for the broadcast. Now, everything is different. It had been about 3 months since Camilla had lost her job and her family. At first, she hadn't spoken to anyone much. Her parents had been cold, her mother had called occasionally, but the conversations had been strained, and her father still hadn't wanted to hear from her. Logan Pierce had left New Orleans shortly after the scandal. As far as she knew, the board had suspended him from management until the commotion had died down. She didn't know the details, though. They had stopped communicating. Their brief romance had been a thing of the past, with no promises. The hardest part is dealing with self-loathing. Camilla spent a long time going over the moments that led to her downfall in her head and berating herself. But neither tears nor regrets could change anything. One day, waking up in an empty apartment, she realized either she would let this destroy her completely or she would try to start over. Starting over was not so easy. The doors of the television company were closed to her. Several attempts to send her resume to regional channels were unsuccessful. Apparently, the bad reputation had spread throughout the market. Who would hire a presenter with such a scandal? Day after day, Camilla looked for a way out. The money she had put aside for a rainy day was melting away. She could, of course, work as a waitress or in a store, but she felt that would finally break her. All her life, she had been proud of her career, her ability to speak and be interesting to the audience. Was this talent really no longer needed? The solution came unexpectedly. She came across an article on the internet about a former host who, after being fired, launched a successful podcast. Camilla exclaimed to herself, "This is it." After all, she still had connections, a name albeit tarnished, experience in interviews, and a lot of ideas. And most importantly, the need to talk to the audience again. During the first few days, she enthusiastically got down to preparation. She set up an improvised studio in the kitchen. She bought an inexpensive microphone and learned how to use recording and editing programs. She planned the episodes. She decided that it would be honest and interesting to talk about life in the media, to interview ordinary people with unusual stories. She even thought about touching on the topic of personal mistakes and lessons. Perhaps her experience would be a warning for someone. And now the day has come to record the first episode. Camilla has settled herself at the small kitchen table, putting on headphones over her freshly washed hair. In front of her is a laptop and microphone. The red recording indicator is already on. There is a thrill in her chest, almost like before a live broadcast in the old days. She closed her eyes for a second, took a deep breath. She remembered the advice she often gave herself before the show. Say it like it is, from the heart. That's what she was going to do. A click of the mouse, the recording began. Camilla was silent for a few seconds, collecting her thoughts, then spoke, trying to keep her voice even. Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, whenever you listen to me. This is Camilla Tate. Yes, the one you might have seen on your morning TV screens. Now I'm in a different role trying myself in a podcast. Honestly, I'm nervous, as if this is my first broadcast in my life. She paused, smiling slightly. Her voice sounded confident in the headphones, at least from the outside. Perhaps I should explain why I decided to enter this new format for me, Camilla continued. As some know, I recently found myself in a situation that changed my entire life. Finding myself in an unfamiliar role is painful, scary, but oddly enough, it gives a chance to look at many things differently. I lost a lot, but gained time to think and rethink. Today, I want to start a new journey with you. I may be talking to an empty room, but I hope someone will hear me. In my podcast, I plan to speak honestly and openly about what I know best, people and their stories, about ups and downs, about how we cope with mistakes, and maybe my own experience will be useful to someone. She paused, surprised at how calmly she spoke these words. A month ago, she couldn't even mention her life out loud without crying, but now she could. My morning show used to be called New Morning, Camilla said almost jokingly. Well, today is a truly new morning for me, the first morning of a new life. I suggest we start it together. She inhaled, feeling a lump in her throat, but it was not a lump of fear, but of strange excitement. She continued more cheerfully. So, get comfortable. Today, in the first episode, I will tell you a story about how one teacher from a small town decided to become a musician at 50 and what came of it. This story inspired me not to be afraid of change. With each new sentence, Camilla felt her confidence returning. It was her voice, her intonations, her element. Even though there were no studio spotlights or film crew around her now, she was the host again, her own director, her own scriptwriter. When the first episode ended, she pressed the stop button and leaned back in her chair. Her heart was beating happily and quickly. She had done it. Of course, there was still a lot of hard work ahead, conquering a new audience literally from scratch. But now, sitting in the silence of the small kitchen, Camilla felt proud. She had not allowed herself to drown in grief. Instead, she had found a new goal. Her own smile was reflected back at her from the laptop screen light, a little tired, but sincere. For the first time in a long time, Camilla Tate smiled at herself and believed that not all was lost. Half a year has passed. Life moved on slowly but surely. Camilla settled into her new apartment and her new role. Her podcast, which she symbolically named New Morning with Camilla, was gradually gaining listeners. Of course, it wasn't the same fame and audience as before, but every small step forward brought her joy. In the morning, looking through the statistics of the episodes, she smiled. The latest episode had already been downloaded by more than 1,000 people. Not bad for a new podcast. And most importantly, there were reviews. Yesterday, she received a letter from a stranger who thanked her for her frank conversation about life's mistakes. The letter ended with the words, "Thank you for sharing. Now I don't feel so alone." Those words meant a lot. Camilla reread them and felt warmth in her chest. Moments like these were worth working for. She glanced at the calendar. This weekend marked exactly 1 year since her wedding, an anniversary that would never happen. Camilla had expected the date to be painful, but to her surprise, the wound was slowly healing. She no longer had nightmares about that night. Sometimes she still woke up crying from loneliness, but those nights were becoming less frequent. The phone vibrated on the table. A notification popped up. A new message in the messenger from Nora. Camilla felt a slight excitement. She and her cousin had not corresponded since the divorce, except for a couple of neutral updates from Nora about her grandmother's health. She opened the chat. There was a photo of Nora and Ethan, both smiling, with a wedding ring noticeably on Nora's finger. Under the photo was a short caption. "We are engaged. I know this is hard news, but I hope you take it calmly. We want you to know that we are truly happy and grateful to you. Without you, we would not have met each other closer. We wish you to find your happiness too. N." Camilla stared at the screen for a long time. Her heart began to beat faster. Her palms began to sweat. Here was confirmation of what she had suspected. Nora and Ethan were together. It would seem that it was time to experience a pang of jealousy or bitterness. But suddenly she felt relief. As if another sin had been atoned, for Ethan was not alone. There was a dear person next to him. It may be strange, her own cousin, but after everything that had happened, it seemed fair. She thought for a moment and typed a reply. "Congratulations. You deserve happiness. Take care of each other." She sent it, closed her eyes, and exhaled, feeling a heavy burden fall from her soul. A quiet ring at the door made her start. Her mother appeared on the threshold, holding a bouquet of autumn chrysanthemums and a small pie in a box. "Mom?" Camilla stepped back in surprise, letting her in. The mother looked a little embarrassed. She walked into the apartment and looked around. "I decided to drop in, to see how you are doing," she said quietly. They hadn't seen each other since the summer. Camilla felt the usual lump in her throat, a mixture of guilt and love. "Please come in," she muttered, taking the bouquet from her and feeling confused. "I'm glad to see you." The mother placed the pie on the table. They stood in silence for a few moments. Then the mother sighed and suddenly hugged her daughter. "Cammy," was all she said, her voice trembling. Camilla gasped in surprise and hugged her mother tightly. Tears gushed from her eyes, long-awaited ones. "Forgive me," she whispered. "Forgive me, Mommy." That's it. Quiet," the mother said through tears, stroking her daughter's back. "Me too. Thank God you found the strength to stand up. I listened to your programs. My clever girl, you say everything so honestly there." Camilla pulled away and wiped her eyes, trying to smile. "Did you listen to the podcast?" The mother nodded, a little embarrassed. "At first, out of curiosity. Then, you speak well. For real. For the first time in a long time, I felt that it was my girl speaking, that the Camilla I know had returned." Camilla cried again, but these were tears of joy. They sat at the kitchen table and cut the pie. The autumn sky was gloomy outside, but Camilla felt light in her soul. They talked for a long time about the past and the present. The mother said that the father had also started asking about his daughter, although he pretended to be angry. That people gradually stopped gossiping about the scandal. The news, like any news, had worn off in a few months. Some old friends initially condemned Camilla, but now sympathized more, having learned about her attempts to start over. Camilla listened, warming her palms on a cup of hot tea. Her heart was surprisingly calm. She realized that she had received the main thing, a chance to correct her attitude to life and regain the trust of her loved ones. In the evening, left alone after her mother left, she went out onto the small balcony of her apartment. Rare moths were circling in the light of the lantern. The city was noisy with cars in the distance. Camilla took a deep breath of the cool air. She still had a lot to do: build a career from scratch, find a new environment, and finally forgive herself. But now she knew she could do it. She looked up at the sky, where a single star was visible between the clouds, and with a light heart she smiled at the new beginning of her life. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.